This is Suburban On Air and Cohen in the City. Here is Mike Cohen.
Well, I'm here with Rabbi Mordecai Zeitz from the Beth Tikvah congregation in Dollar des Ormeaux. And many years ago, I guess it was back in 2013, Rabbi Zeitz, you announced that you were retiring and you became the Rabbi Emeritus, and it's like you never left. You were still present, as ever present in the community, but now you're really leaving. You're really retiring. You're moving to Israel in July. After 50 years, you founded this congregation, and this amazing congregation in the West Island. Why have you decided to move to Israel at this stage in your life?
Well, firstly, it's been 62 years since I came to Montreal in 1963, and we debated, and that was the key phrase over the weekend of tribute, whether it was 60 years or 62 years, and I said, pick your own number, but it's been a long time. But basically, I stayed here for very personal reasons in terms of doing things, although I had worthy replacements over the past 12 years, Rabbi Fishman, Rabbi Mandel. But yeah, there was a place for me in the synagogue, some of the older members, and also doing some other pastoral jobs, and had a sister living in Toronto that needed care. And so a lot of things kept me here, and I had strong roots to this community. And it was really hard for me to just pick up and leave, even though Israel was on the radar a couple of years ago. But circumstances came together to say, if we don't do it now, ain't more time. When is it going to be? And therefore, it was either going to New York, where part of my kids live, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, or to Israel. Knowing the sensitivity of my kids, that eventually we are all going to be together in Israel because they are participants and supporters of Israel, etc. We figured we'd pave the road, and they would follow, and airplanes hopefully continue to fly. So we will be together, and Israel was always my passion. You remember that, took thousands of people to Israel, even in the toughest of Intifada times, to Israel. I stood to Israel, marched to Israel. We know the circumstances, and therefore sometimes a leader has to say, okay, no more just the words. You can talk the talk, but you got to walk the walk, and we are going to take a long walk to Israel and settle in Jerusalem.
I know you led a lot of missions to Israel, and I remember in the late 80s, I was on a Jewish National Fund young adult mission with a good friend of yours, David Hirschon, and we were, I don't know where we were somewhere on tour, and all of a sudden shows up Rabbi Zeitz, comes walking out of the wilderness with a group from Beth Tikvah. So I know these missions were important, and I suppose many of your congregants who go to Israel will still be able to see you when they go there.
I told them as they move up the hill to Jerusalem, I'm right there, so just wave and we'll welcome you in.
It's not too late, Rabbi Zeitz, for you to be a member of the Knesset.
Well, it's, I've had my parliamentary situations, here in Beth Tikvah, and we just want to settle in and try to do a few things. Family-wise, growth-wise, learning-wise, etc. And if I can be a service yet in some course and so on, I still have a little energy left, I hope, and please God, we can make a contribution and to be closer to my family on a regular basis, who are basically only visited 2-3 times a year visiting us, but now we'll have some quality time there, as the others will hop a plane and visit with us.
Now, I was dating myself because when I said over 50 years, I try to make myself feel younger, but I'm 62. So I've been around as long as you've been in Montreal area. But take me back. You and Charlotte, your wife, were newlyweds, and you had a choice in 1964 between California, I believe, and Montreal. How did you decide to come? Why did you decide to come here?
Because of the snow and poutine and the French language and all of those wonderful things that were in Quebec. But seriously speaking, we had just gotten married. Family was important. California was a long part away. And it was really a challenge to build a synagogue, a Jewish community from nothing. And that when I first came here, the first evening they took me, for a drive and a drive and a drive and a drive and a drive from downtown city from the Soda Club where we had dinner, and they took me to this long Fashlepka drive that ended nowhere in the midst of the winter where the snow was over the roof, and there was a hole you had to crawl through to get to the house where a few people who migrated out to the West Island for whatever their reasons were met me. And I tell you, the warmth of those families melted the snow and the cold and so on. And immediately there was a special relationship. And that relationship, I must confess, as I said, over this past beautiful weekend, is what kept me in Montreal. We had plenty of chances to leave, other opportunities and so on. And I basically turned them all down. Why? Because there was a special connection. And I was able to see some of the people who started with me as young people, really not interested in Jewish community and so on, because who went to the West Island in the 1960s. Those who wanted to escape Montreal and all the other stuff, coming into the country with the horses and the cows and like you have now in Hudson and so on and so forth, they're no move. And that's where we were. But you had the bond in terms of finding a Jewish identity, sense of Jewish community, and building something anew was very, very attractive. And at that time, Yeshiva University was putting in seed money, as they do with many other synagogues, Beth Zion, Beth Hoari, and so on, were basically seed money that Yeshiva University did and planted rabbis there. And I was joining some of my colleagues who were very, very, very helpful in terms of, getting us off the ground. Rabbi Shoham, Rabbi Halpern, these are tremendous, tremendous leaders. And I said, okay, let's see if I can emulate what they have already accomplished. And so it was. And I have remained because these people are not just congregants, they're really mishpacha, their family and their friends, and that we grew together.
You really built a vibrant synagogue life in Dollar Days Ormeaux, but you also must be proud of the role you played with Hebrew Foundation School.
Well, we said we will not have a vibrant Jewish community unless we have a day school, and busing in every morning to town, ETT or Hebrew Academy or Bialik or so on, or JPS was not really the answer. So we decided, okay, we started in terms of getting together, and finally after a year or two we said let's bite the bullet, and we said we're going to start a kindergarten, and from kindergarten we said now we got to have a grade one. It was the same year that Shara Shamayim basically voted down their own day school, if you remember that, and they became independent to go forward. And I said, I don't have the time here in July and August to really go through the rigmarole as Shara Shamayim did in terms of a vote and so on and so forth, and what happens if we don't get enough support and so on. These kids are in kindergarten. We had a sort of an understanding that we're going to go forward, and therefore, in the midst of the night, we made a separation of congregation, let's say, from Hebrew Foundation School as institutions, and I had a mandate that if you have 10 kids, it's a go. Well, I have to admit that there was a little cheating there, because at that particular moment, I only had 9 and a promise. But thank God the promise came through, and I was able to redeem the understanding. We had 10, and the 10 grew to 400 or 500 over the years. The Foundation School, which was really a gem. The first day school had French as the major, an English institution as French as the learning language.
Was you've been on record as saying that your most difficult moment as a rabbi at that synagogue was the election of the Parti Québécois and the effect it had on your congregation?
I'm sitting in my office and I'm looking at the place where I got the news. There was a meeting and the vote was going on. And as I walked up the stairs from the meeting, some very, very downtrodden individual said, it's PQ. And we had just voted to go ahead with the building of the building. And we said, have no choice, because in the next couple of weeks, half of my membership left.
Unbelievable.
And some of our greatest leaders founded Jewish communities in Calgary, Edmonton, and many went to Toronto, just leaving everything because there was such despair. However, we had some hearted souls, myself included, said, I'm not leaving, I'm staying. And French or no French, there will be a future. And I must say, quite frankly, the PQ government was very, very generous in maintaining support of Jewish day schools.
They were.
The other political parties. And I said, look, with faith and openness and so on, we can deal and we can go through. We've gone through it historically before. And so it was. We had very good relations.
We have a government in power now, the CAQ, that if Rabbi Zeitz with his kippah decided, you know what, I want to be a school teacher in the public system, they would tell you, you can't if you wear your kippah. Bill 21 must be something that disturbs you as a religious leader.
I am more upset and fearful today than I was at that particular time. There I was still hopeful, and there were number one sane heads that could see the next day, the next month, the next year. They didn't make decisions just for now because it's politically, expedient. But basically, we had some great leaders, even though I did not agree with them politically or philosophically in terms of where we were going. Because I'm a New Yorker, and in New York we have 86 different languages and an ethnic mix and so on and so forth. And, I went to New York from different neighborhoods as they changed. So did the Jewish community change, and we adjusted and so on. But there was always a tremendous mutual respect in those days. But right now, I think the decisions are being made that do not see the reality of a changing world and the need in terms of open doors and open windows and open hearts and open minds in terms of what the future holds. And therefore very fearful that people are becoming very narrow-minded in some of the decision-making.
Well said. You're leaving at a time when anti-Semitism might be at an all-time high in Montreal, dating back decades, many decades. Your synagogue's been the victim of anti-Semitic vandalism. The Hebrew Foundation has been. What are your thoughts as you leave on the state of anti-Semitism in this province?
We got firebombed twice. We were one of the first, and then they came back for more. And it was very disheartening. The first time I was just taken aback. How can this be happening? I mean, we live with open doors in our corner, as if you remember, we had religious institutions right down the block, across the street here. And way down the block, we had the Christians, and we had the Lutherans, and we had the Salvation Army, and we had all kinds of stuff. And this was called the religious street. And we respected each other, and we got together, etc. And yet, this was absolute hate, which we never felt, never felt before. And I said we have to be vigilant and to have security 24/7 and the cameras, and you have to be buzzed in and so on and so forth. Was very disconcerting. Of course, it brought back historic nightmares. But I think it was because we basically gave a kosher stamp for the hatred that was taking up our stamps. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It became the norm. It became all right. It became acceptable. There were no consequences in terms of it. And not that I want people beat up and put into prison and so on. But there has to be consequences for your actions and for what you say. And there seems to be a deliberate hesitation or refusal to really apply the law. The law says, how do you get such demonstrations? I sat with people sometimes, and I asked them, about the demonstrations. These were members, leaders of the Muslim community and so on. Not that I'm pointing fingers, but basically I asked these very professional people to say, you went to think when they said, from the river to the sea. What does it mean? It means that doesn't mean anything. And the answer is there's a Jewish state in the middle of the river and the sea. Does that irk you? Doesn't it? Some emotion and so on of what the consequence of. And if you say it, as we will know, you say a falsehood or you say something over and over again, it becomes the norm. So
Yes.
streets and bandanas and so on and so forth. That's very, very disconcerting, and the language and so on. And we see McGill, and we see Concordia, and we see campuses, and we see just hate speech, and basically it becomes very, very depressing. And that's not the reason I'm leaving, because it's worldwide now. It's a disease.
Yes, it is.
Right, and everybody's saying, "Why are you going to Israel?" In terms of you're living right under the bomb. And I said, "No, basically, at least there, I know what I'm standing up for. And as far as I'm concerned, Israel is the most moral state that you will find, and it speaks the truth. And any country, as I mentioned on the Shabbos morning and even Sunday night in my remarks, this is a message I wanted to leave to my people, that we have to stand up to be counted, that there's a pride in being Jewish, and we have a message that we've been teaching the world in terms of mutual respect and honor and integrity and so on. Yes, for 2,000 years, we did not have an army to defend us. We know the results, unfortunately, pogrom after pogrom and Holocaust and so on. But we should not just take a Holocaust, nebuch, and I'm sorry, or Rachmanis. No, times have changed. We stand up to be counted. And look what we've contributed to the world. Take a look at technology. You wouldn't have all the technology to bring all these gatherings together in the streets by a push of a button. And Israel wouldn't have invented and did all this technology and medicine and everything else. We have to stand up to who we are, but not only that, but as moral people. How many lives? And when I visit Israel, and I sit with my family in shul and so on, and walk the streets, I see empty chairs, and these empty chairs, I read the list. These kids are not coming back. These kids are not coming back. And yet it's the most moral. How does many of these people, these kids lose their lives? Because they didn't want to harm the civilian in the population. And they went to where they were booby traps. And they told people where they had a bomb and so on. But tell me, any leader of any country, would they tolerate thousands and thousands and thousands of missiles and rockets coming into their backyards, into their kindergarten, in their schools, and so on? But this is not part of the dialogue. You don't see this and so on. They didn't have to be on October 7th. Yeah. If there was an October 7th, it could have been over October 8th. Gives back the hostages. This thing has slipped down for God knows how long. And even today, Hamas has said, no. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? We had a Trump next door. Okay, he wants to annex us. How about living next to somebody who wants to kill you and wipe you out? What do you do?
Yeah, good. That's a very good point you make. To conclude, there's highs and lows to being a rabbi. There's a lot of simchas that you officiate at, but obviously for any rabbi, the toughest thing is presiding over funerals. They're all difficult, but there's probably some that resonate in your memory that were excruciatingly difficult for you to deal with.
Unfortunately, now as we reach many of us who started the synagogue and still are around, whether we live in Dola or in town and so on, that have become, lifelong friends. And when they pass on, and I walk the cemetery now in terms of officiating, and I pass over the graves now, this is my past. These are the people who built, step by step, the synagogue. It's hard, but yet I take them as a source of inspiration. That I had their friendship, I had their support, and there's an end to everybody's life, but much appreciation. I won't name names because every single one, whether they were a macha or not a macha, we had people, hundreds of people over this past weekend who I didn't realize how I affected their life by a word, by a tap on the shoulder, by a phone call, or just a sermon who said, "I know you were speaking to me." So these things are very, very significant and very, very important. So I think one of the highlights is now I've had the opportunity of a rabbi to officiate for 3 generations. I married the grandparents, the parents, and now the rest boys and the girls in the weddings and so on. To stand under a chuppah where I married, I did the wedding of Bobby and Zadie, you know that? And so on and so forth. So these are highlights, and I've had the privilege of being here, 62 years to see it all. And there reaches a time, as I reluctantly said, no, I'm not applying for the job. And it's not going to be a third coming. There was a second coming,
Yeah.
okay, and a second going, because other religions have a second coming, but I had a second going, and it was I can't appreciate the community enough. The hundreds and hundreds who came Shabbos and Sunday, and it was just like a memory lane.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
departed company, and it shows that in Montreal there was always respect for rabbis.
Absolutely. Well, Rabbi Zeitz, you've made an indelible mark on this community. I'm proud to say that I go back with you, not 62 years, because that's when I was born, but, certainly, from my late teens when I started writing for the Suburban and started calling you for quotes, and when I worked at the Canadian Jewish Congress and you were present at all of our events and just, everywhere we go. So I want to wish you the best of luck, you and your wife and your family, and hopefully we'll still see you visit Montreal every now and then.
Thank you so much, and you were a very good friend and a tremendous member of the Jewish community, doing the things you're doing all over the place. So good luck to you. Continue good luck. Much love.
Thank you, Rabbi Zeitz.